vidas.
There is a looming global food crisis, or it's already upon us, helped along in no small measure by pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And the question is not when will it rear its ugly head, but what are we doing to prepare to meet it head on? Food security is, after all, equal to national security, and the Marcos administration seems to understand that, given that the president-elect is handling the agriculture portfolio himself for the time being. Because how do you make sure that food is both accessible and affordable to all so that hunger doesn't turn into anger?
I think that the problem is severe enough that I have decided to take on the portfolio of Secretary of Agriculture, at least for now, and at least until we can reorganize the Department of Agriculture in the way that it will make it ready for the next years to come.
Good evening, I'm HONTIVEROS. Welcome to your weekly political appointment fix, politics as usual. Our first guest joining us via Zoom is a lecturer from the Ateneo de Manila University Economics Department, Carlo Fermin Adriano. Carlo, good evening, and thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Good evening, Pia.
Yes, well, let's
Good evening,
begin with
Pia.
this.
Thank you for having me here.
Yes, so this is a, do we say that this is a looming food crisis, or is it really already upon us?
It's already upon us. It's already here. And if I can just share my
Yes, yes,
my
please do so.
data.
Yes, and you're going to discuss three main points with us now tonight, Carlo, and very
Yes.
quickly, what is the problem, the causes of the problem, and recommendations. So let's begin
Yes.
with what is the problem? Can you define it for us?
So first, we have to separate the short-term problem and the long-term problem. So for the short-term, which is the immediate, there is a global food crisis right now, wherein the food price index of is higher than when you compare it during the 2008 and 2011-12 food crisis. Sorry, but I cannot share my screen.
No, we're going to take care of that. You can go ahead with the points you want to make, and we're going to be showing your PowerPoint.
Yeah, and then if you take a look at meat prices, even all of the agricultural commodities, they're going up, and they're higher than the 2008, 11, 12 years, wherein we have global food crisis during those period. Mm-hmm. And then the long-term problem is really the underdevelopment of the agriculture, fishery, and forestry sector. Mm-hmm. And because of this underdevelopment, we have low productivity, and this have two major socio-economic impacts, negative socio-economic impacts. One is the high poverty incidence in the agriculture households, and the other one is soaring domestic food prices.
All right. You're referring to the screen, the particular slide, which is entitled The Underdevelopment of the AFF. AFF meaning, of course, agriculture, forestry, and fishery, contributing to high domestic food prices. And the average share of food and non-alcoholic beverages to inflation is 43% from year 2000 to 2021. And if we look at the years, so year 2000 to 2021, 22 years in the making na ito. So this is not like, it just surprised us now, it just turned the corner and biglang nandiyan. This has been going on. This is a problem that has been in the making for more than 2 decades.
Yes, that's correct. Again, 43%, and let me point it out that food and non-alcoholic beverages is just 1 out of the 11 baskets in the computation of inflation. Just take note, only 1, and its contribution is already 43%.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, earlier you were referring to this agriculture, forestry, and fishing sectors growing by only 2.5%. And its contribution to GDP was only 0.3%. Again, within that same time period, 2001 to 2021.
Yes. Basically, if you take a look at average growth rates of the 3 major sectors, these 3 sectors are the agriculture, industry and service. For AFF, it only grew by 2.5%. Compare that to industry, which grew by 4.5% and service at 5.5%. Now, if you take a look at the average GDP growth from given the same period, the economy grew by around 4.8%, and agriculture's contribution to that growth is only 0.3 percentage points. So it's very low.
All right. And then may low productivity pa, no? So serving as a double whammy to agricultural workers, low wages, high poverty incidence, all these factors coming into play. And I just want to, let the control know na pakita lang na po natin yung first 4 slides ni ng PowerPoint presentation ni Dr. Adriano. Anyway, so ito yung problema natin, and food prices expected to increase, no, given this global food crisis. Can you talk more about that?
So basically, the global food crisis is due to external shocks. Number one, COVID-19 pandemic, wherein there were disruption in logistics and trade. But basically, we're recovering from that already. And number two is because of this Ukraine and Russia war. Now, why is this important? Because Russia is the third world's largest oil producer. Russia and Ukraine account for 25% of global wheat export, and wheat is an important ingredient for animal feeds, which we feed for our livestock, poultry, and even our fish. And the third one is that Russia is the world's largest exporter of fertilizers, and we all know when we grow crops, we use fertilizers.
Okay. Of course, sorry. Sorry. Of course, this Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, began in February, but the effects are devastating. However, we are aware of what has been going on even before that. I mean, yung presyo halimbawa, no, ng, what is it, wheat, no?
Yes.
It was going up like 2 years before that. That's because of the pandemic already.
Yes, due to pandemic, and actually not just wheat and corn. Corn and wheat are the major inputs for your animal feed. And why did it go up, especially corn? Because basically China bought everything. They stockpiled basically due to the African swine fever, and they wanted to basically counter the effects of ASF, and therefore they need a lot of inputs for their animal feed industry. So they stockpiled.
Okay. And of course, the effects of all of this is that nutritious food is not as affordable and not as accessible for Filipino families in general.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Can we talk about Philippine fertilizer? It's been growing, prices have been growing by almost 100% beginning in 2019. And lately, this has affected the farmers so badly, and therefore, domino effect again. Mataas masyado ang presyo ng fertilizer, therefore, farmers cannot plant as much as they would like, right?
Yes, basically they cannot use, there will be less application of fertilizer, and we apply less of fertilizer that will have repercussion to our production. Just like, for instance, there's a study of Phipilines that given the high prices of fertilizer, our rice production is projected to decline by 1 million metric tons for this year. That's 6% of our total production.
All right, 1 million metric tons. Siyempre nakakatakot yung 1 million metric tons, but ano yung effect nun on our dinner tables? No, that means that more families will grow hungry.
Not necessarily, yes, because of high prices. Basically, if we take a look at economics, the less supply, the higher the prices.
Okay. And sometimes ang nangyayari sa mga poor families, Carl, di ba, kunyari, bibili lang ng 1 kilo, 2 kilo, so baka mas kaunti pa, or bibili ng 1 kilo and then they'll stretch it out for the entire day or 2 days.
Actually, there's a study from PIDS, Philippine Institute of Development Studies, about coping mechanism of farmers due to high prices of food. And one of those, basically, how they cope with high prices, they buy cheaper food. The other is basically, the other repercussion is, like, for instance, they mentioned that hindi nila pinapapasok yung kanilang children to school because they don't have enough money and they don't have enough money for the allowance of their children. And another thing is, another coping mechanism which is very sad as well is yung healthcare nila. Na instead of going to the doctor because masyadong mamahal yung food prices, they just tend to have self-medication na lang. So those have repercussion to basically the what we call human capital development of Filipinos, especially the young Filipinos.
Yeah. There are other causes of this problem, Carl, that you've been pointing out, and they are not very well known, but napakalaking ng epekto nito. Very quickly, talk to us about this rice-centric budget. So, halimbawa, di ba, we have a problem already, baka minus 1 million metric tons na. Tapos, small land size, a hectare per farmer. At saka yung isa pa, yung inadequate attention sa climate resiliency. How is this a cause of the problem?
Number one, basically, if you take a look at the budget of the banner programs of the DA, around 50% of that budget goes to rice. And we have many crops in the agriculture. We have corn, we have high-value crops, there are many high-value crops. We also have livestock and poultry. 50% of the budget already goes to rice. This budget does not include the budget of the National Irrigation Administration. It has a budget of around 45 billion, and 80% of that 45 billion, so around 36 billion, also goes to rice, to provide irrigation for rice farmers. There's also the Rice Competitive Enhancement Fund, minimum of 10 billion pesos, also goes to rice farmers. And if you take also a look at the Philippine Crop Insurance Corporation, most of their coverage is going to the rice farmers. So we neglected the other non-rice commodities. And therefore, hindi natin na-develop ito. Especially, for instance, yung livestock and poultry natin. And then, if you take a look at the contribution of the agricultural commodities to the AFF growth, ang main contributors natin before the pandemic were the non-crop commodities. It's not rice. We put everything to rice, and if you take a look at the presentation that I gave you, rice ranked last in terms of contribution to AFF growth. So if you just take a look in terms of contribution to AFF growth, we should put our money on the non-crop, which is basically livestock, poultry, and fishery, and not actually rice.
Okay. Yes. Go ahead, Carl.
And then for the small land size, basically the problem here is because of the relatively low, small land size, which is around 1 hectare only, mababa yung ating productivity because we cannot achieve economies of scale. Like, for instance, yung mga farm mechanization program, you won't be able to use it efficiently if it's only for less than 1 hectare of land. And even yung use of other technologies, if you're only going to use it for less than 1 hectare of land, you won't use it at all. Hindi talaga, walang return on investment. So we have to increase our average land size. And then the other point that you mentioned is the inadequate attention on climate resiliency. Now, the Philippines is considered as one of the most vulnerable to climate change. And to give you an example, ang estimated damages to AFF due to typhoons and calamities is around 25 billion annually. And yet, yung ating Climate Resilient Agriculture Office of the DA has not yet been institutionalized. And if you take a look at our agriculture insurance and even our irrigation system, both will help with mitigating the effects of climate change, are also underdeveloped. And most of them goes to the rice sector as well. So those are one of the problems with the AFF sector.
Okay. Well, Carl, Adriana, as you were discussing already, marami ka ng mga, hints about what recommendations would you make. But very quickly lang, President-elect Marcos has said he's going to be handling the agriculture portfolio. Does that send a good signal? What do you think of that? And is that going to help us handle this food crisis, or, take the bull by the horns in so many words?
Yes, it's a good sign because basically he recognizes the importance of the agriculture sector and he recognizes the gravity of the problem that the agriculture sector is facing. Now, for the recommendation, in the short term, basically for 2022, given that we cannot do anything with the budgets, it's already there, we really need to import. Unfortunately, or fortunately for others, we really need to import so that we can manage the food inflation. And we can only do that if we can temporarily reduce the tariff rates of the key agriculture commodities. Second is we can seek bilateral agreements with other countries, like for example India. They produce some fertilizer as well. So mag-bilateral agreements na tayo with them. We discuss with them internally. Those are for the short term.
All right. Carl,
The long term,
yes.
next time.
Yes, the long term for a longer time.
Yes.
Next time. Carl Adriano, many thanks. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Salamat sa'yo. We'll be back after a quick break. Stay tuned.
SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao, para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.
Ito ang RPN, Radio Philippines Network, DXKT 1071 sa inyong mga radyo, ang Radyo Ronda sa Davao.
We are not setting aside the military component of national security, the ones which we are used to talking about, but I think we should bring it nearer to the individual, because at bottom, national security is your security as an individual. These are all the things that affect the daily acts of living. Hindi ba yun ang katiwasayan ng kalooban mo? Of course, matiwasay ang kalooban mo na walang gera mangyayari dyan sa contested South China Sea. But this is so distant from your day-to-day life. I'm not saying it's not important, but what is most important is your life, everyday life. And that is the component of human security.
Well, as Clarita Carlos is saying, your life, your everyday life, and she is talking about food security. Let's continue this discussion of the looming, well, as Carl Adriano was saying, it's not a looming food crisis. It is here with us now with our second guest, agricultural economist Roel Briones. Hi, Roel. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us. So it is, you agree with that, no? It is the food crisis is already upon us. Hindi ito looming crisis. It's here.
Yes, good evening, Pia. Of course, it is already here and we're already feeling it. In fact, aside from all of these developments in Ukraine, even from last 2 years, the meat supply of the country has suffered dramatic loss from another source, the African swine fever, which Professor Carl Adriano already mentioned.
Okay, so you would say, how would you, Roel, define the problem? Can we take the bull by the horns and define? Can you define it for us?
Of course, this is basically the problem of a poor country, right? So in the final analysis, the country suffers from perennial shocks to its food security because it is poor. If you look at a country like Singapore, with almost no local production, but because of its wealth and its income, it is rated by the Economist Intelligence Unit as the most food secure country in the world. So in the long run, the solution to this is to have, for the average Filipino to have sufficient purchasing power that despite these swings in food prices, somehow kakayanin ang budget. Now, we're not yet in that position, but we can certainly put in some measures that will move us towards a more resilient kind of food consumption track.
And what are these measures?
Una yung food supply, no? So Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Is now sitting, will soon sit as Secretary of Agriculture, which is a very salutary development. I agree with most analysts about that. But remember, his father presided during his term over a green revolution that coincided with the rollout of a green revolution in rice. That was really a revolution that really made staved off all of these predictions of massive famine in the developing world, third world at the time, no? So we need something similar to that again, no? So that we can revitalize our food supplies through application of better science and technology.
That would be your recommendation already, Ruel? Or
Yes,
there-
that
are
is
there more?
that is it. No, because the problem is we are kind of fixated with short-term solutions, and that's fine. Except now, unlike before, we have a much narrower fiscal space. A lot of these short-term solutions, they're very costly. Frankly speaking, no, a very subsidized price of rice, depending on the degree of subsidy and how you're administering it, could blow a hole through your budget in the order of say 200 plus billion, no, depending, which we can hardly afford now. But what we can certainly afford is like boosting R&D in our agricultural sector, especially those with promising income generating opportunities for our farmers, because ironically, our food producers are the ones who are bearing the brunt of this food insecurity. Now, of course, we tend to be distracted by the need for very short-term solutions, no? But the fact of the matter is we have postponed too long the need to undertake long-term solutions. The sooner we can do it, the better, and we'll be in a better position to face the next crisis, because it will come.
Okay, no question about that. Well, we've heard so many success stories of small farmer groups, small farmers, no, and kung ano yung mga best practices. What is it about us? Why can't we just get things together, get our act together, and really solve this once and for all? It's sad, no, like you say, this is a problem of a poor country. But we know that if we can get our act together, that we can really handle this, hindi ba?
I think one of the big problems is we have attributed much of the problem to a mistaken villain. So many of the actors think that market forces are at the root of the problem, when in fact it's not. No, market forces are actually one of the solutions out of the problem. So for instance, there's a market force that will tend towards, after decades of social justice, which I acknowledge, in terms of breaking up the large estates characterizing our countryside before. So this goes to the problem mentioned by Professor Adriana, no? But we have gone a little bit too far in terms of fragmenting, because of the combination of the land reform program plus population growth. And yet the land reform program is also freezing our land markets and making them too rigid, so that we don't allow for consolidation of land holdings. So we should unleash the power of market forces in that regard, no? Of course within limits. So we don't need to say go back to 1,000 hectares, 10,000 hectares haciendas. We can maybe raise it to say 20 hectares, allow more higher land ceiling than the very, very restrictive one of say 5 hectares. So this is the kind of solution we're referring to. Another market force that we can deploy is access to world markets. So even though all of these world market developments are forcing up world prices that we've already discussed, the major culprit for the high prices of imports is actually government. Government is the one imposing 40-50% tax that dwarfs any spike in world markets that we're seeing. So it's difficult, kind of hypocritical to complain about how unreliable world markets are, when it is our own governance which is forcing us to pay higher prices for these stuff.
Shooting ourselves in the foot, what's going to happen if we don't do all this? If we don't resolve this now, if we don't plan way in advance, what's going to happen? People are going to go hungry, right?
Well, whenever there's a crisis, yes, of course. Now, of course, the crisis will pass. Then we think, okay, maybe the problem will solve itself, and then we'll wait for the next one. We'll just muddle along as usual. So I think with a new decisive mandate, the new government might be able to make a turnaround.
All right, ayusin na natin ito. Ruel, be honest, I'm a cultural economist. Well, thank you very much for being with us tonight. We'll be back after a quick break. This is Politics as Usual.
SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.
Ito ang RBN, Radio Philippines Network, DXKT 1071 sa inyong mga radyo, ang Radyo Ronda sa Davao.
We're still with Politics as Usual, your weekly political appointment fix. I'm Pio HONTIVEROS. We are on our final stretch. Joining me now is the officer in charge of the Nutrition Surveillance Division of the National Nutrition Council, Ellen Ruth Abella. We're talking about nutrition because when people are hungry, nutrition flies out the window. Ellen, thank you very much for being with us. Let's talk first pre-food crisis. No, how badly nourished are Filipino children? What are the numbers?
I think not only we have a food crisis, but we are already facing a nutrition crisis. For the past 10 years, our stunting figures have always been at the 30%, which is considered as a high public health problem.
When you say stunting figures, you mean?
We have 30%, more than about 30% of our children under 5 are stunted. So when we talk about stunting, we're talking about chronic malnutrition, meaning these children are not getting enough nutritious food or eating enough nutritious food for them to grow properly.
Yeah,
So yes.
Sorry, Ellen. Merong malnutrition, merong undernutrition, right?
Yes. Malnutrition can be undernutrition, which is it's either low height, stunted, or children are have low height. Below their ages or for their ages, we have low weight. And we are also talking about overnutrition. So those are forms of malnutrition.
Okay.
So we are talking about the double burden of malnutrition here.
Of course, when we talk about these numbers and these definitions, it's easier for us to explain it this way, no? Kapag kumukulo ang tiyan ng anak nyo, napakasakit yon, right? And mas masakit para sa mga may hirap na pamilya because they're not able to buy food the way the rest of the population can, right?
Yes, exactly. And if this persists, we're not just talking about stunted children in terms of height. We're talking about stunted children in terms of brain development. So if this persists further, we are looking at a very dismal future for our children and also our country. So I think not only we need to address the food crisis, but we also need to address nutrition crisis. So as our 4 other speakers are talking about, we need to prevent our people, our population from getting hungry. Hungry enough that they really cannot afford to buy food. They go to sleep hungry. They worry about where they will be getting their food for the next day. Those experiences. So it's a very dismal future for the Philippines if we do not address this food crisis, and also for our countrymen to be able to buy nutritious food.
You've answered already my next question, because I was going to say, if we don't handle this food crisis well, and as you also say, this nutrition crisis well, what's going to happen? No? How much more badly will children be affected? So, can you give us a ballpark figure? Sabi mo kanina, stunting figures 30%. Kung hindi natin ma-handle ito properly, yung 30% magiging ano? And then the corollary question is, if we're able to handle it well, as Carl Adriano and Ruel Briones were saying earlier, if we handle it well, what kind of an impact will we see?
First, if we cannot address the 30%, we cannot decrease the 30% that we have now, we're looking at more than 3.2 million children who will be underdeveloped in terms of brain development, so we do not produce productive citizens in the future. But if we are able to address this early on, provide the necessary nutrition intervention at the first 2 years of a child's life, then we are looking at a better future for our children, so they are able to go to school. They will be more competitive in the school. When they become adults, they will also be competitive at work, and then will be very productive when they have better job opportunities for them to have better jobs, better incomes.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ellen Ruth Abella of the National Nutrition Council. Maraming salamat sa iyo, Ellen. We've been told before, don't talk politics at the dinner table or at a family reunion or in Viber groups and risk warfare, digital and otherwise. But we can talk about it here at this table on this show. Your weekly political appointment fix, politics as usual. I'm Pia Hontiveros. See you back here next Wednesday, 8 p.m.